Hello, my name is Jay Marksman. Welcome to Cave Paintings and Campfires, conversations with creatives and storytellers. Now, in this episode, we won't be having those conversations since this is episode 0, where I'll be explaining a little bit about myself, what this podcast is all about, and why I wanted to start this show. So this episode is a little bit different from the rest, but it should serve as a good introduction to the topics we'll be covering here around the campfire in the future. So hopefully in the next few episodes I will have guests on as well to talk about these same kind of topics with me. Also, just as a side note or a warning perhaps, I have a tendency to swear sometimes, especially in my fiction, but also while talking, and I don't do that all that much, but there probably will be some cursing in each episode. I don't want to restrict myself or restrict my guests in any way, so I hope you're okay with that. If not, that's totally okay, no hard feelings. Recently, I read somewhere that creativity is a way of life, and I'm not sure I would describe creativity as my way of life, but it's something very close to it, for sure. I have so many different creative projects, it's hard to keep count sometimes, or at least it's hard to decide what to work on when I have the free time. So currently, for example, I'm making games. I also make music for some of those games. I'm writing books, I'm writing short stories, I have a board game project and a small Android app, and now this podcast as well. So I'm interested in a lot of things. Also very interested in movies, TV shows, filmmaking in general, though I'll probably never be a filmmaker. Or maybe I will, I don't know, that's kind of the point here. So I'm interested in creating so much that it's hard for me to understand people that aren't interested in creating sometimes. That's reason number 1 for starting this podcast. I kind of want to learn what other creative people think, since I only know a few people who are similar to me in this way. I'm lucky to have a girlfriend who's very creative. She takes very cool photos and her drawings are great too, though she would probably never admit it herself. She is also interested in games and writing, and she's doing both 3D modeling and pixel art now, and we're working on a cool little game project together. So both of us are interested in a lot of different creative mediums, and both of us are also very serious introverts, which is a topic I would also like to cover in a future episode, since many creative people are introverts. But anyway, she and I are very much alike, but I don't know many other people like us. Not outside of game development at least. And there actually aren't that many game developers I know well either. So through this show, I'm hoping to connect with a lot of people who share these interests and passions and want to talk about me. not about me, but with me about these topics. I listen to a lot of podcasts, interviews, panel discussions, analysis videos on YouTube, that kind of thing. And I always have a lot to say about the things that are being discussed in these shows, but there's always one problem, and that's that I'm not on these shows. So I decided to start my own show to talk about these things with you guys. And like I said, I think I have quite a lot to say, but I also want to learn from other people and share that knowledge with you. So my goal is to have a lot of different kinds of guests on from a lot of different industries to talk about things that they are good at and that they are passionate about, they are interested in, and how they want to make them better, how they think they are different from other media, and how that affects you guys and, you know, the culture around us in general. So things like video games, movies, TV shows, books, comics, different kinds of design work, architecture, even things like history. I want to learn about a lot of different things, basically anything related to creativity or storytelling or both. And I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later in this episode, but basically I think everything has something to do with those two things. So it's a broad topic, and that works well for me because I'm interested in so many different kinds of things. But I want every episode to be a conversation, despite what I said earlier in the start of the episode about this episode not really being a conversation. But I want to be talking with people, so I want to be talking with the guests, obviously, but also with you, the listener. So I want this to be a conversation with you as well. I want to know what you think about all this, and what your field is, what you're interested in if you're not a professional in these areas, that in these industries and storytelling and creative mediums we're talking about. And I'll tell you how to chime in a little bit later in the episode, how to contact me, how to stay in touch. But I really want to know what you think about all this. My background is in video games. I'm currently working as an artist in a game company, and I've also made my own games. And I'm working on a game with my girlfriend right now, like I mentioned before. And what I often find is that people don't really know what video games are. And you might be wondering, like, of course we know what video games are, like, what the fuck are you talking about, Jay? But maybe that's a weird way to phrase it. What I mean is they don't know their potential, they don't know what makes them unique, they don't know what makes them different, what differentiates them from other media like books or movies. And movies are actually a really big part of this, since most games these days, or at least like big budget AAA titles, they take influences from cinema, so they aren't really trying to do what's best for games, they are trying to make a cinematic experience. So basically, almost like you're controlling a movie. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, and I like plenty of games that do this. For example, the Uncharted series is a great example. I really love those games, but games can do so much more, and they can tell their stories in unique ways, and I think people should talk about these kinds of games more. What is unique about games? What makes them stand out? Often when this gets discussed, people say like, well, you are the character, you control the character, you can decide what to do. And that's a big part of it, but I think that's kind of only scratching the surface. Now, a great example of what I'm talking about when it comes to leveraging the strengths of games and using the fact that the thing you're making is a video game, the thing you're playing is a video game, to its fullest potential is, in my opinion, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which was directed by Josef Fares. I hope I am saying his name correctly. He's a Swedish film director, movie director. He's also a game director now. His latest game is A Way Out, which I haven't played yet, but I really want to, and maybe I'll talk about it in a future episode. But Brothers, I think, is fantastic, since what it does is, well, first of all, if you've never played a video game, or if you're playing whatever your like level, experience level is when it comes to games, I think you can beat this game, and I think you will have a good time. And it only takes around 2, maybe 3 hours to beat, and it isn't particularly hard. But I think it uses the medium to its full potential, like I said before. And I can't get into details without spoiling what makes it so great, but what I can say is that the game delivers an emotional bow that really works. And it's not in spite of being a game, but it's because you are physically controlling these characters. It's because this is a game that it works so well. And it's hard to explain without spoiling it, and even if I told you, it's much better to just experience it for yourself. So I highly recommend this game, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Now, Brothers isn't the only example of this, of course, and it isn't the only kind of example of games that do this kind of stuff well. So, for example, leveraging the strengths of being a game, I think that almost every role-playing game does this, that you can't really do this, branching paths, dialogue options, stuff like that, that role-playing and adventure games do. You can't do that in a movie. You can do it in a book. Well, you can do it in a movie as well, but that's, if you go to the movie theater to watch a movie, you don't expect to be able to vote on what happens next or something like that. That would be, well, it would be interesting, but that's not how the world works currently. So that's something unique to games also. And there are a lot of different things, games to like self-referential games, like meta games, as some people call them. Games that kind of know that you're playing a game and use that fact in interesting ways to tell their stories. And action games or like shooters that make you kill people, but the story and the context make you feel really bad for doing that. So it isn't fun. That's also a misconception that I think people have, that games are supposed to be fun. I don't think they're supposed to be fun necessarily. Like many games are, and they should be, but games can do so much more. They can, I think a better word for it is compelling. So you might have a very sad, very serious game, but you're compelled to go forward, experience the story, experience the world, the characters. The same with movies, books. Like, not all movies or books are fun necessarily, but they're compelling. They are very, very interesting in some way. They like draw you in. And that, I think, is what games can do as well. This is my reason number 2 for starting this podcast, actually. So I might know a lot about video games. I might have a lot of opinions on how they are misunderstood or underappreciated, or some aspects of, game development are underutilized in today's games, or, many different things about this industry. And I might know a thing or two about other things as well, like writing or filmmaking. Well, I don't know a lot about filmmaking, but I'm interested in filmmaking, and I know a thing or two about writing since I've written a book and written short stories, and I'm generally interested in storytelling. So I've read a lot and listened a lot about storytelling and writing, but I'm not an expert on those things, and I'm not an expert on anything, really. So I want to talk to a lot of different people who are experts, or at least very passionate fans or hobbyists like I am, and tell me and tell you, the listener, tell us how their storytelling medium can be better, how different it is, what makes it unique, I guess, what are its strengths as opposed to, other media, and how they perceive it as opposed to how we perceive it, because always the people on the inside, they have different opinions than us, just the consumers, basically. So why do I say storytelling medium instead of creative medium, or just, medium in general? Well, I think these are basically the same thing. I think you have to be creative to tell a story, and you have to be kind of a good storyteller to be creative. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'll get into it a little bit here. I think storytelling is more powerful in general. Like, we are all creative on some level. Like, most people remember drawing for fun when they were little, or, writing or playing an instrument, telling stories, something like this. But we can be creative in our work too, like in problem solving, like, I don't know, in replacing an ingredient in a meal when you're out of something that the recipe says you should use. But, most people wouldn't really call these people creative people. That's not being, like, that's not who you are. That's just something you do on a daily basis, or not even on a daily basis, but sometimes you have to be creative in your life, but that's not a way of life, like I said at the start. So, creative people in our minds, at least this is my interpretation of and my experience, they are often professionals, artists, designers, musicians, people who do creative things for a living, or just are about art instead of, for example, they have a day job because their paintings don't pay for their rent, but the painting is what they want to do in life. That's, their passion, the thing they want to continue doing, even if they don't have anything else. That's the thing that makes them want to continue doing that shitty job they might have just to be able to, finance their creative side. But not everyone is a creative person with this definition, at least. And since I am one, and probably you are too, or you know someone who is, I often wonder why isn't everyone a creative person, but that's not the point here. So the point here is that I think everyone is a storyteller. So even if you're not a creative person per se, you are a storyteller, and well, by the same kind of definition, maybe not, so maybe I just contradicted myself, but everything we say to each other every day is storytelling. Pretty much everything we tell to each other follows the 3-act structure, even if we don't realize it, or we haven't really thought about it when we started telling the story. But basically, to put it in really simple terms, is just you have the beginning, the middle, and the end. Shawn Coyne, who is the creator of StoryGrid, which I will be talking about sometime in an upcoming episode probably, he has this concept of the inevitable but surprising conclusion, if I remember this correctly. So that's kind of what most stories have. At the start of the story and in the middle, the things that happen there inevitably lead to the conclusion, but when you hear the conclusion, it's still surprising. So this might apply more to like commercial fiction or novels, movies, stuff like this. But I think the surprising part still is relevant even in everyday conversations. So for example, when you come home from work and you've had something happen during your commute that you really want to tell your family, usually you don't start at what actually happened when you tell this story. First of all, you want to get their attention, so you say something like, "You won't believe what happened to me in the train," or whatever. And then they are engaged, then you tell your story, but you don't tell what happened right away, you start at the beginning. So you basically, even in this kind of story, you have the 3-act structure. You start at the beginning, you go through the middle, and at the end, there is something surprising. Kind of like a punchline, like in a joke, which are also stories. Jokes are also storytelling. They also have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the end is usually just funny, or always funny, unless it's a really bad joke, I guess. So that's kind of what I mean with each of us being natural storytellers, even if we don't realize it. Like, we don't need to be writers or filmmakers or anything like that necessarily, but we are still telling stories to each other every day. If you made it this far into the episode, thank you. This is my first podcast I've ever created. If you're still here, I guess you found it compelling in some way, so that's fucking awesome. Now, I would really appreciate it if you would get in touch if you know someone creative, someone I talked about in this episode, game developer, director, artist, writer, any kind of creative field you think would be a good fit based on this episode. Please get in touch. I'm always looking for interesting and talented people to talk to, so don't hesitate to contact me. Also, please share this episode and other episodes when they are available on social media. Tell your friends, and especially important for getting the show off the ground are the ratings on iTunes. That's the largest podcasting service in the world right now. So rating the show there and reviewing the show there really helps a lot. And of course, if you could give it 5 stars, that would be amazing, but that's always your choice. Now, if you have questions or comments or, guest suggestions, just go to cavepaintingsandcampfires.com/contact, where you'll find my email and my Twitter, as well as a link to our Discord server, which you are more than welcome to join. You can also comment on each individual episode on the website, and that's where you'll find all the show notes for each episode. For this particular episode, the URL is cavepaintingsandcampfires.com/episode 0. That's the number 0. And if you'd like to check out my book, it's called Of Thieves and Dying Leaves, and you can find a link to it at jmarksman.com. It's right there on the front page, where you can also sign up for my email list and get some free short stories. The book is a crime drama, quick read, and it's not overly expensive, so I would really appreciate it if you took a look. All my other relevant links are at the bottom of the page at cavepaintingsandcampfires.com. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you again around the campfire.